The Process, a podcast about creativity and experimental music. In the world of experimental music, outcomes and accolades for creators can be uncertain and at times seem far and few between. Therefore, creators and practitioners of experimental music must embrace the one thing they will always have complete control over: the process. This podcast aims to understand this creative process by listening to new works and discussing them with their creators. Each episode focuses on one creator and their music. Understanding how and why they create can inform aspiring creatives and help audiences better understand and navigate experimental music. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and I'll be your host as we explore the world of experimental music, creativity, and the human need to find purpose in their world and lives. This is The Process. Hey everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of The Process. On today's show, we have Ana López Reyes, composer, performer, artist, musician, writing the piece we're going to hear today was performed at Roulette Intermedium with the string quartet, the Rhythm Method. Ana is performing on interface and with her computer alongside of the quartet, as well as there's like a really strong video component. So it's a really great video. We'll watch some excerpts from that performance, but I will put links in the show on various platforms so that you can watch the whole video. It's about a 40-minute piece. Really interesting, a lot of storytelling. It kind of focuses on, or the main focus is an interview with her grandfather, who weaves these really interesting kind of ghost stories. And so there's this whole realm of like El Día de Muerto, or the Day of the Dead, and this idea of like grieving and loss. And it's interesting because Ana talks about how, you know, the inspiration for this piece and for a lot of times in general is from stories or from ideas. Sure enough, the piece opens with a really fantastic story from her grandfather about revenge, which is a classic tale. And pretty much every culture has their sort of revenge stories. A couple other things we talk about is some specific ideas, like when creating an electroacoustic piece like this. So when you have a live string quartet and then electronics or the computer, how are all those things going to interact? And it's funny, I've been talking to a lot of people on the show recently who are entering or having that conversation about like, how do you make it this sort of seamless thing? And I think Ana has a really cool approach that she uses, kind of using software as well as just, you know, her talent for composition to kind of create a piece that doesn't sound like a live thing and a not live thing, but one whole entire piece. And it'll be interesting to hear her sort of take on how she envisions electroacoustic pieces. We also talk a little bit about artist names. Nnux is Ana's artist name. And we just have a little conversation about that, about how, you know, composers in 2024, capital C composers in 2024, sometimes use stage names. Sometimes they use their own name. And I think Ana has sort of an interesting take on why she chooses to use both her name and also a stage name or performer name. So without further ado, let's check out a little bit of the performance from Intermedium at Roulette in New York City, featuring the Rhythm Method string quartet and Ana on computer and electronics.
No, de Toño tenía, creo que su hija, bueno, su hijo adoptivo, y un día, pues, un vecino, un fulano, pues imagínate cómo estaba, me pidió la pistola porque lo iba a matar y quién sabe qué, furioso. Y entonces desapareció bueno, el odio no, pero sí entonces el deseo de matarlo porque que llegó un amigo de él y le dice, oye, Toño, ¿y cómo estamos? ¿Y tu hijo dónde está? Me lo encontré allá en México. ¿Cómo que lo encontré? Sí, me lo encontré allá. Fíjate que pues me platicó que pensaba que estaba bien, que si te veía, pues le dijera que estaba bien. Así que, pues te paso el recado.
I think it can come from different places. Lately, it's like a lot about storytelling,
Yeah.
which is something that I think it's like a very important part of what I like, who I am, how I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm like always imagining a whole story, a whole concept, like it's a story that I want to tell. And I think then that from the past few years, it's been like that I'm like imagining a story, like which
Mm-hmm.
usually has like some like fantasy in it, or like there's like some theme that I want to explore, and I'm just like thinking of ways to explore it or like to tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
So
And is that necessarily a musical idea, or is it
no,
just like
it's never
it could
a
be
musical idea.
right?
It's
Yeah.
never. It's like
Yeah.
usually it usually has to do with other things,
Right.
and then I'm like kind of imagining like how to tell that story with music.
With music, yeah.
And with music, with visuals, with text. So it's lately been like that, but I don't know if lately. I think it's just like been like that.
Right. Yeah.
So it usually I'm like usually just like thinking about that story for years, you know, like for a year, for like a few months.
Right.
And then I like start like bringing together the ideas, and then I write the music or like do the project. But yeah, like it's usually something that like sort of inhabits my mind, and I'm like, you know, like doing the dishes and like thinking about that story, thinking about what I want to say.
Yeah.
That's one thing. But some like the other part of the process, which I like to explore, which I haven't done enough of lately, but I enjoy, is just like exploring sound and sitting with my synth and just messing with it without any storytelling or any like concept, or just like
or
having
like a looming deadline where it's like, okay, I've got to come up with like 10 minutes of music or something like that.
I also like sitting down and just like playing. That's also part of it when I have the chance, and that's something that I enjoy. The other part of it is just reading and listening, which I consider like an important part of the process. I like consume a lot of different like, you know, like I go to shows, I listen to music, I read, so that's like all like this information that's coming, and like that feeds my idea. So I think like the process is just like a continuous
it's all music, it's all encompassing. The thing about going to shows is I love to go to shows, but I have to fight myself from being like, okay, so what are they doing? How are they executing this? Okay, like what knob are they turning? What are they, you know what I mean? Like I have to be like, Doug, you're at a musical event, enjoy it, interact with it in an emotional way. And Some of my favorite concerts I'll go to, or performances, and I'll just be like, I don't even think about like, well, how did they manipulate the video in this part or whatever like that. I was just like, wow, that was amazing. Like I had this emotional response. So
Yeah, that's good. I mean, I tend to really enjoy the music or like the art in general that
yeah,
will like give me both, like
yeah,
give you like that emotional experience, but
right,
also blow your mind in like
right.
in a technical way.
Yeah, they're like, how are
Uh,
they doing that? And you're like, I don't care. This is amazing. I'm having a great
yeah,
time. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
like
yeah,
the balance that I'm like, yeah, like
yeah, yeah,
that,
yeah.
I like that a lot.
Where would you go? Where you mentioned your synth, is that like the first place? Is that the first tool you go to start working on how to translate a sort of story idea into a musical idea?
It used to be, but not anymore lately.
Hmm.
Um,
So where do you go now?
like images, I think.
Hmm.
Uh, I think it's different depending on the project. Like
Sure.
right now, like the one that I sent you, Ausencias,
Hmm.
I went to like storytelling itself. Like I interviewed my grandfather for that
Right.
and about
Right.
like stories in his town.
Yeah.
And I had that. But also like lately I'm writing this piece that has to do with star formation and like I'm just
Hmm.
like looking at
Hmm.
images of that and like
Right.
how like the places where stars are formed, like this
Sure.
nebulae.
Yeah.
So I'm just like drawing. It's like
Hmm.
all like very
Yeah. Yeah.
like it comes from different places. I'm
Yeah.
like drawing like what I imagine, like what I feel. It's like
Yeah.
it's like from different places. Sometimes yeah, like but if I'm like just playing with sound, it
Hmm.
usually is a
Hmm.
sound sample that I'm like messing with. But that inhabits this world somehow.
All right,
Um,
so it's time to roll up your sleeves, and you have a week to bring this piece to life.
mhm.
Where do you go? Is that like, and I appreciate the like the process and the rumination and the drawings and all that. But if it's like, okay, Anna, we need 10 minutes of music by the end of the week,
Yeah,
where do you
that's
go? Where do you go? Do you go to the computer?
Ableton.
Ableton.
Yeah,
Great,
the
great.
computer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, to the computer.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so it's mostly just
Yeah.
Ableton and like start
Yeah.
like with like some sort of processing of a sound
Hmm.
sample.
Hmm.
And yeah, like that's usually what happens. Like I spend like months
Yeah.
thinking
Great.
and just like
Yeah.
inhabiting this world and
Yeah.
writing, drawing,
Yeah.
um, just
Hmm.
like looking at stuff,
Hmm.
listening to music, thinking about it. And then I usually end up just like doing like being like shit like the deadline.
Yeah, yeah. It's coming. You're like, oh,
And
that's next
then
week. Like, oh yeah.
in a month I
Yeah.
will like fit together the pieces. Like that event itself, like that's
Hmm.
the Rhythm Method.
Hmm.
It's this quartet in New York.
Hmm.
And we performed that piece at
Hmm.
Roulette in New York.
Hmm. And it's interesting too. You said you performed. You performed with them, or we performed together. What was your part of the performance?
I was doing the electronics. I was
Hmm.
triggering samples,
Hmm.
like manipulating some of the sound
Hmm.
live.
Hmm.
Um, there's one section that where they have a score, like the score is like they have text only, and they're
Right.
like improvising. But I was like getting their signal,
Yeah.
and like processing that live and like doing like live electronics with them as they were improvising,
I
which is
see.
something that I like to do.
Yeah.
So I was doing different things.
Yeah,
Hmm.
see, that's interesting. I couldn't tell if it was your electronic sounds coming from the computer, whatever the interface, and then plus string quartet. I couldn't tell how much interaction there were between the two. Like, I didn't know if you were live processing, the string parts, but
Not
w
always. I mean, sometimes
yeah,
like at some
yeah,
moments of the piece, I'm just triggering samples
right,
that are like part of the soundscape. But
right,
at some other moments, yes, I was processing
yeah,
the ensemble. So the way I thought about like this whole piece is like as a whole, like the whole thing is like the electronics are kind of like the world of the spirits. So you
I
like
see,
I have like samples of like people who are not here like physically, and then like the
right.
acoustic part is like the living, like
The
the world of the
corporeal, yeah, yeah,
yeah. So like
yeah,
the ones who stay, the ones who are
hmm,
like stay who are like present physically
hmm,
and who are dealing with these losses.
yeah,
And so you have like the quartet as a representation of that, and like the electronics as a
right,
representation of that world that doesn't exist like physically anymore. So the electronic part of
hmm,
that second movement is
hmm,
all built with these voices of these women who are not here anymore, and
right,
so you hear them like here and there, and like you hear them speak, you hear them sing,
right,
and it's like oh like this soundscape that's like around you. Like I
yeah.
do like this
Yeah.
movement with my hands because it's like I like
Yeah.
imagining it as like this
Yeah.
floating thing.
And while
So
those
that's
are floating and kind of especially there was like the vocal that kind of was like popping and skittering and sort of
mhm,
moving around. The strings are very sort of stationary and there's a lot of like long notes. There's a lot of
mhm.
harmonics.
I just like talked to some people and like went through some interviews
Yeah.
like just online
Yeah.
of yeah, people who have dealt with these things
Hmm.
and how kind of like it feels like it's like they can't like move, you know?
Yeah.
It's like paralyzing,
Right.
and especially like in like the second movement, like the third movement, I like explored that idea of like just like this paralyzing thing that doesn't let you move.
Hmm.
Um, And like because the third movement, like there's this whole other issue in Mexico, which is the people who go missing, like,
Right.
and
Right.
you just never hear about them anymore.
Right.
So then the mothers of this of like there's
Hmm.
like collectives of mothers who are
Hmm.
looking for their
For the
missing
yeah.
children,
Hmm.
and the government doesn't do anything, and then the mothers have like come together to like dig
Hmm.
with their own hands to try to find
To find where
their
the
loved
yeah.
ones. It's horrible. And
Yeah.
so I sampled a lot of
Yeah.
like shovels and
Right.
like
Yeah.
earth and just like this like heaviness of like digging and
Right.
digging and digging and not finding anything, and
Yeah.
just like that feeling of heaviness
Hmm.
of like you're like digging and nothing happens and you don't find anything and you can't let go of this pain.
Hmm.
You like the sort of the idea of not finding closure.
Right.
So it's like it's that, and like as this whole thing is like floating.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, I mean, I was thinking of that when I wrote all of that.
So here's one. Here's more of like a technical question then. So you had to create this piece. You had to you created this piece, and I guess my question would be: so did you start with writing the string part? Were you working in like Ableton and kind of coming up with some sounds? were you working closely with the quartet kind of as you were creating it? How did this work? Was it like, did you write all, 30, 40 minutes of it and then say, here's your score? Was there like kind of a jam session where you guys were sort of playing together, improvising together?
No, I didn't write this for this quartet.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that premiere, I hired them to
Great.
perform the piece. So
Yeah.
I wasn't working closely with the quartet.
Great.
And I just wrote the piece and they
Yeah.
played it.
Mm-hmm.
I There used to be this thing that you could do that you can't do anymore, the rewire tool. I don't know if you've used
Right.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you could write a line in Sibelius and
Okay.
like with Note Performer, like that would like
Right.
play, and then
Great.
you could route that to Ableton, and you would hear it in your sessions with the electronics.
Great. So
And
you
that
could
was
just have,
amazing
yeah.
for me because I could like write my score
Mm-hmm.
and sort of and I always like do like two scores, like one
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna like serve as a mock-up of how it's gonna sound, and then like the other one where like
Where it's
like you
like
could edit.
performance directions type.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
sometimes, like for example, for harmonics, like I'm not gonna
Mm-hmm.
like I'm like writing the real sound on
Right.
the mock-up score, and then
Right.
and
Yes.
then like I write it like the proper way. But
Right.
so then you could like when I wrote that piece, you could still do that
Mm-hmm.
and like between Ableton and Sibelius,
I see.
that you could like connect them and you could hear whatever you had in your score, you could hear it on Ableton. So
Yeah.
I was like
So,
building the soundscape as I was writing the
I
score.
see.
So it was
So you
all
could kind of
together.
improvise with what you wrote or like kind of play around with it, or you could
Exactly.
be like listening and saying, okay, what if I did this effect at this point?
So
And
so that way
Yeah.
it just becomes like it's just one thing.
Right.
It's not that I'm like writing a piece
The
for string
piece.
quartet and
Yeah.
then adding the electronics or something. It's just
Yeah.
like as I write,
Mm-hmm.
I do it all together as
Together.
one thing. Like I'm like, like thinking of my grandfather's voice as an instrument,
Right.
and then the violin as another instrument,
Right.
and then like like there's like other sample as
The
another
worldly,
instrument.
the
And
voice, or yeah.
so it's like all like like instead
Yeah.
of a string quartet, really it's like a whole orchestra of like samples
Right.
and some strings,
And see, that's how it really comes across. Like when I'm listening to it, it comes together as one thing, one sound world. It's
which is funny because if you were to play the string quartet alone, it doesn't work.
Yeah. Is that always the case then? So like if you can't play one part in solo, then is that like a good thing or a bad thing? I think
for me it is because like I'm not thinking about this as a string quartet.
Right. Plus electronics, like string quartet plus
no, it's just like one thing, and I think like that's the way I would conceive it in general. Yeah, but I really like need to hear it like all together. Which I think like in the piece that I'm working on right now, I'm gonna change it a little bit, and I'm gonna just like try to imagine it a bit more, like just in my mind, because it's like a way bigger ensemble, and they're gonna be improvising more. So I think I need to just like let it go a little bit and imagine. before being a composer, I was just like a well, I like I've had like many different
Mm-hmm.
phases,
Sure.
but I was like definitely into like the more like pop music world or like electronic music or
Yeah.
like really influenced by people like Björk,
Sure.
who like
Yeah.
that's her real name, but
Yeah. Yeah.
uh but people or like Arca, like do you know
Mm.
Arca?
No, I
Um
don't.
Arca she's a producer from
Mm.
Venezuela who works
Mm-hmm.
with Björk, and her
Okay.
real name is Alejandra Gersi,
Right.
but she goes by Arca, and like she's like
Yeah.
all her projects are Arca,
Mm-hmm.
and I think like that's very, very common in that world.
World. Yeah.
And like I I think like it's like much more common to have an artist name in that world than
Yeah.
using your real name.
Yeah.
Uh and then like in the more like classical
Yeah.
academic music world is
Yeah.
it's not that common.
Yeah.
But since it's like it's the same thing, like I think like for me what I've been doing or what I'm trying to do is it's just that my music is my music in
Mm-hmm.
any of those worlds. Like if I'm like like putting out my album with my songs, it
Mm-hmm.
sort of inhabits like the same world as the string
Yeah.
quartet.
Yeah.
So think
Mm-hmm.
about it, like it's just
Mm-hmm.
like all gonna be the same, like part of the same thing. So it makes sense for me to just use my artist name for that.
Right. Yeah. And somebody like, Bjork has always kind of pushed the envelope between like, is this pop music? Is this what is this? Is this or
Yeah.
is this, in the classical contemporary new music genre? Yeah. That
Which
kind of
is yeah, which is what I
yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
I that's like my main thing. That's how I think about it, like
Well, Anna, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me about your music and the
definitely, yeah.
piece Ausencias. Um, we can check out this video on YouTube in its entire length from the performance at Roulette. Before I let you go, can
Mhm.
you just tell us a little bit about where we can go to find out more about you and your music, and maybe tell us about some of the upcoming things you have going on?
Well, I have my Instagram, which is underscore NNUX. And then I have a website, which nnuxmusic.com. And yeah, I think that's where you can find my information. And I have an album on Spotify too. Um, that and some videos that on my YouTube channel. I have videos which belong more to the pop music, like like experimental pop electronic, um, with like visual artists that I work with. Um, and yeah, it's like NNUX. I mean, I think if you Google it like that, it will come up. And for projects and like upcoming projects, I'm working on an album that I've been working on for a long time. But I think like it's close. I'm mixing it, and I really hope I can like just put it out soon. And that's like another story, and but it's like with my voice a lot. I've recorded my voice like a whole choir and like a lot of like experimentation with the voice, like sort of like really inspired by Meredith Monk, but with electronics and with many different things. And I'm excited to put that out. I'm writing a piece for Alarm Will Sound, um, that that's gonna get premiered next year. That has to do with star formation and like the ideas between science and myth. That's something else. I have an exhibition in Mexico City, which it's gonna be a museum exhibition where I'm doing like a sound installation. That's with my collective. It's a performance art collective. And then I have a performance art show in LA in December. Um, so I think that's all that's coming up.
Thanks to Ana López Reyes for sharing her time and music with us. As always, if you like this episode, please check out other episodes in the series, like, subscribe, or leave a comment on your preferred podcasting app. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and this has been The Process.